Finally, we come to our media picks of the month, and uh, well, your media pick it's a classic, isn't it? Let's start with yours. It's nice and short and sharp,
Oh,
and
I thought we could end with mine. It was a short and sharp, but okay,
okay, okay,
we'll
okay,
go with that.
okay, okay. No, no, it's fine. It's fine. If you want to end with it, it's fine. I'll dive in with mine then. My media pick of the month is
Yeah, please.
extremely topical. Not to bring us back to COVID-19 again, but it's actually uh it's a TV series that I have a guilty pleasure in watching, and that is a TV series called Doomsday Preppers on Netflix. And there's but I don't want to talk about Doomsday Preppers because it's such a strange series because these people often they are preparing out of a place of almost what looks like trauma. So you'll have someone who survived Katrina living in New York, terrified about what would happen. I mean, presumably right
Mhm,
now in New York, she's probably enacting her bug out
mhm.
plan or whatever. Um, but what was interesting is that you could look at people as being kooky or paranoid or uh, psychologically harassed to the point of genuinely thinking that the world is coming to an end. Um,
Mm.
but also, there's actually a wonderful essay, and this is kind of actually what I want to point to. A little essay on sapiens.org. It's an anthropology website.
Mm.
Called "For Preppers, the Apocalypse is Just Another Disaster," and this guy, and this guy
Okay.
is brilliant in so much as he I think he does a really quite a good job of exploring and sort of humanizing um, a community based on a decade of research at least. As an anthropologist, meeting people, um, learning that actually not all preppers are, you know, gun-toting.
Mad.
Well, it's not that they're bad. No, no, it's more just like so actually, tell you what, I'll tell you a little story. So what my favourite prepper of the series that's currently available on UK Netflix is a guy who works in a quarry, who rather owns a quarry, and he sells large hunks of stone to people who want uh, eye-catching pieces for their garden. So he sells
Right.
stone by the ton, and he calls
So far,
himself
so
Rock.
good. Yep.
Yeah, he calls himself Rockman, and he's probably one of the least uh, aggressive people that I've seen on this show. In so much as he talks about wanting to be prepared, so that he isn't one of the people who's asking for help in a crisis, and he can be helpful. And he talks about how he
And
can.
and presumably he's got handy access to industrial explosives because he blows up rocks for a living.
Well, he has, yeah, yeah, and in
Yeah.
in the
Okay,
course of the
fine.
show, he's installing a bunker, and he talks about how he's going to use his skill with rocks to, block off his driveway, create pillboxes, which I'm sure that's right up your alley, pillboxes, Shooters Hill, and all that in London. Um, World War Two. That's a World War Two archaeology reference for people who don't know exactly what I'm talking about there. But also, he's specifically doing that with a view to being able to help people as well. So he's safe and he can help people in a crisis. And I think that's very admirable. Some of the more bizarre people are essentially the ones who, and this is quite often the case on Doomsday Preppers. It's people who basically say, "This is what I'm doing, but if you come to my house, I'll kill you.
Look,
I'll shoot you."
I
Um, but they say, but this essay, and this article is exploring in the same way that I do, I guess, the TV series. He's exploring from a socio-cultural anthropological perspective um, why people are preparing, how they're preparing, and what being, as it were, prepped means. And it just feels very topical right now, given that we live in a world that really wasn't prepared. And when they tried to prepare, they overbought perishable foods. They didn't think about batch cooking. They didn't think about storage or anything like that. And actually, because of, and this is the most bizarre thing, because of this guilty pleasure, when we went to do a bit of a large food shop, we didn't panic buy at Archaeo Soup Towers, but we did a large food shop. I was saying, well, actually, we need to think about, so we don't get lots of fresh veg, we get frozen veg. We get, and it was interesting how by osmosis and with a little bit of cringe, I had absorbed some sensible ideas about this sort of scenario. And so I'm not remotely saying that I am a prepper,
Yeah.
but rather what I'm saying is it's not just weird. And I think this article does quite a good job of exploring that. I don't know. I mean, how does that all sound to you?
Yeah, look, I do find the whole phenomenon fascinating, and apart from the fact, as in fact, my partner Rachel said to me once that her dad had always explained in the 70s
Hmm.
sort of nuclear paranoia with, well, look, yes, it could happen, but
Hmm.
every generation pretty much since in recorded history has had its doomsday scenario.
Hmm.
Has expected the end of the world. Some religions are predicated on the end of the world.
Hmm. Hmm.
The Vikings had it all storyboarded.
Well,
Um,
interestingly, and sorry, this is a slight side note, but interestingly, with the Vikings, I find it fascinating that they had a belief system where the gods were fated to die. I find that really
yeah.
interesting. And what does that
Oh,
mean about
absolutely.
your view of the world? But anyway, go on.
That must imbue a certain fatalism. You'd think.
Yeah, yeah. Or a certain, YOLO.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, look,
YOLO
in the end,
Sven.
yeah,
Sorry. Go on.
there are certain things. I mean, there was again. I apologise if anyone finds this offensive, but there was an absolutely glorious one-liner in Marina Hyde's article in the Guardian at the weekend,
Hmm.
responding to, or looking at how people are responding to the COVID-19
Hmm.
crisis.
Hmm.
And she had it on. I'm paraphrasing, but only very slightly. Um, uh, was it Americans are responding by buying more guns? Um, uh, but given that all schools are shut, the preferred venue for using them is not available.
Oh,
Uh,
oh. Like, ow.
in other, look, she's a satirist
I
and a
thought you'd
brilliant one.
say that, that you'd have to have a really good aim to shoot a virus, but like,
No, no, she look. This is what that is an extreme comment on. Is
Mhm.
this is all cultural,
Yeah.
and different countries, different belief systems, whatever. There are different cultural responses to crises, to major crises, to the impending end of the world. I say, for somebody growing up in the 70s and 80s, it was nuclear paranoia. I remember very well. First of all, the BBC finally being allowed to show Peter Watkins' War Game 20 years after it was made and banned by the government because it was too scary, they thought.
Right.
And then in the mid 1980s, at the height of the Cold War, before the Thor in 1990 when the wall came down,
Hmm.
and another BBC drama called Threads, and an American uh, film called The Day After, both of which dealt with how civil society would try to respond to a nuclear war. So these things. After the end of the Cold War, then we had films like Contagion, which dealt with what pandemics.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in fact, we've now had the absurdity of. I think it was yesterday. Kate Winslet, who was in Contagion, was being interviewed, giving her advice about getting through the COVID-19 crisis, on the grounds that she'd been in a film about a pandemic. She's got no she's a fine actress, but she's got no medical qualifications, and she's not a sociologist or anything like that. But
Mm.
she was, you know, we,
But you
we
see,
are
so we
it,
are.
we're in very new circumstances for us, but culturally and societally, actually, we've been here before many times.
Well, indeed, and it's interesting, and I guess this speaks to what I was talking about in terms of often you see an element of trauma in the people who appear on this show because whether it's personal or societal, somehow often they feel as though they've been let down or as though they're about to be let down by some sort of structure or system or family member or something. Uh, and and actually, speaking of the nuclear disaster scenario, or the nuclear fear, when the wind blows by Raymond Briggs.
Raymond Briggs, absolutely,
Yeah,
yes.
that's a book. I was just checking now. It's released in 1982, and I remember. So I was born in '84, and I remember as a kid, this book was around. My dad was
Yeah.
a huge fan of Raymond Briggs.
Mm.
So Fungus the Bogeyman for example, was one of the first books that he read to me. But When the Wind
Yeah.
Blows, I accidentally came across as a child, and it scared the bejesus out of me. I mean, the fact that, and you have these perfectly lovely people who are following government advice, and they perish
Mm.
in such a. The imagery is so. And the thing is, that's the other thing as well. It's gentle because it's Raymond Briggs.
Yeah.
It's not
Oh
graphic,
no,
but
absolutely.
the implications of that book horrified me then, and actually even now when I think about it, they immediately horrify me again. And so again, you can sort of see how you can see how the seeds of this sort of experience, and also frankly I imagine that there'll be people now who, for example,
Mm.
who've experienced food shortages or toilet roll scarcity, that they
Yeah.
will begin some sort of backup plan, won't they? Whether that is full on prepping or whether it's just having a cupboard
Look,
in their house that's stocked with dry goods.
yeah, look. No society can go through something as traumatic as we're living through at the moment and not be different at the end of it. The question is how different and where the difference is going to be,
Mm,
and
mm,
that's where the debate is. I mean, I agree with you about the Raymond Briggs When the Wind Blows. In my previous life working in theatre, I was the touring lighting tech
mm.
for a production of When the Wind Blows that was touring around the south of England in
Nice,
1983.
nice.
And it was an incredibly moving show to be a part of, and it packed out wherever we went.
Yeah, I can imagine.
People wanted to put themselves through it, although it was a traumatic evening.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
so not to labour the point, but it's just the fact that
no,
the two characters in the story, they're so wholesome and so lovely, and I really,
mm,
uh, even as a child, I just felt so. I'm not even sure what the emotion is, but you feel it's massively impactful that they end up essentially they
oh yeah,
perish under the stairs, don't they? They end up dying of radiation poisoning, and
because they've done exactly what the government said they should do.
yeah, exactly. So there was a bit of, well, and again, that's precisely what's at the heart of lots of the prepping community's fears is that actually governments don't know what they're doing, and arguably
No,
we've been talking about that in this month's watching brief. Often governments are making it up as they go along. It's interesting,
or,
isn't it?
or concealing truths. And there's a story breaking again this afternoon about what the current British government has done, which is pointing in that direction. Let's see where it goes, but
Yeah.
watch this space. But yeah, one of the other things about these traumatic events is that there are huge uncertainties, and people find uncertainty hugely disturbing mentally and physically.
Yeah, yeah, they
So
do.
yeah.
Just before we finish on your media pick, just very
Mm.
briefly, I just want to highlight a story about this is a little bit of Indiana Jonesiana, as it were. Is that Indiana Jonesiana? That sounds
Not
like a
not 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 that wonderful mural where you've got Indy trying to take the golden bog roll off out of the temple.
no, no. Although that is a brilliant meme. Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It is a yeah.
Someone, I think I shared that on the soup page, and someone said he's gonna have to let some sand out of that bag if he's gonna swap it for the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the story of net quote never before seen Indiana Jones Ark prop estimated to be worth up to $250,000. Not sure who's done the estimation, but maybe there'll be a auction house who's done that. Is Has been unearthed in a San Francisco. Is it in San Francisco? I think. But anyway, the point is, it's a prototype for the Ark that wasn't used in the final movie. It's a design that looks actually quite dramatically different from the Ark in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Um, a prototype of the Ark of the Covenant from the first Indiana Jones film recently found itself on an episode of PBS's long-running Antiques Roadshow, evidently escaping from its former confines in a secret government warehouse. The prop was
Well, it
professionally
wasn't the one in the
valued.
secret government warehouse because it wasn't the one that was used. Come
Exactly,
on.
exactly. Don't be so silly. Yeah, exactly. Um, the prop was professionally valued at anywhere. Oh, there you go. On the show? Anywhere from 80,000 to $250,000. An unnamed man brought the Ark prop to the Antiques Roadshow, saying it previously belonged to his father, who he said was an employee for VFX studio Industrial Light and Magic, working on Indiana Jones, Star Wars, and even Star Trek. The owner said his father worked for ILM as a pyrotechnician. Now, obviously, I guess you'll have some insight in terms of your work in theatre in how props end up in different people's possessions on shows. But presumably, the pyrotechnician shouldn't necessarily be taking an arc prop home. The owner said his family stored blankets inside it, although he did enjoy getting to tell his friends that he owned the Ark of the Covenant. Uh, Um, it's just it's an interesting little story. Indiana Jones is always fun. But what do you think or rather, do you have any good stories about stuff from shows, sort of going missing, inverted
Well,
commas?
it's a well-known it's well known in the business that occasionally people will ask to keep or will be given a prop
Hmm.
or a piece of costume, or they'll ask to keep it, or they'll ask to buy it.
Hmm.
That's not unusual at all.
Hmm.
Sometimes they're given as gifts. Sometimes it's just dumped on the skip, and then people do take stuff. And the point there is obviously the copyright and the ownership technically remains with the production company and the
Yeah.
creators.
Mm.
So, depending on what the contracts are. So, this is a grey area in terms of ownership and so on. Having said that, and naming no names, but I know somebody not far away from where I'm sitting now who's got the prototype of a prop that was used in a well-known musical. Um,
Can you be any more specific than
and
that?
no, I wouldn't want to be.
Oh, okay, okay.
Um,
Cats.
but I happen to know
Les
that this one's a
Mis.
no, well, no, it's not actually. No, it is a it's more sci-fi related.
Okay.
But I happen to know that this is it's been well known in the family. It's been part of the family's children growing up. And
Uh-huh.
what is this thing that's sat on top of the bookshelf in the
Uh-huh.
office?
Uh-huh.
And so yeah, it happens.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess it does. I don't know. I'm not sure I'd want the Ark of the Covenant though in my house. It just feel like it'd bring with it, Juju.
Don't watch.
Yeah, don't look at it, Indy. Don't look at it.
Don't look at it.
Marion, that's it. Don't look at it, Marion. Don't look at it. Okay, right. This has been a long watching brief. Let's finish with your media pick of the month.
Well, hopefully mine
What are
is
you choosing?
very short.
Hmm.
My and again, I'm kicking myself because when we prepped this, I said prep. See what I did there? Um, but I said I was going to for people stuck at home with time on their hands when they finished writing their novel and remembering who it is you actually live with. There was a wonderful quote somebody said the other day was this working at home thing. Um, I met this woman over breakfast and discovered she was my wife. She's actually quite nice. and,
Oh dear. Oh dear.
but anyway, but no, people have got a lot of time on their hands. There's a lot of great stuff out there actually online, and
Hmm.
things that people have shared, and links that people have shared, and virtual museums and all sorts. Um, but I just want to share. Channel 4 have on their website, channel4.com, have opened up to view, and you can watch it. You can pick out favourites. You can watch it chronologically and see how Tony Robinson's hairstyles changed over the years, and how
Hmm.
mobile phones got smaller, and helicopters were replaced by drones
Hmm.
for filming, and all sorts of things. But every single episode that was ever broadcast of Time Team.
Wonderful. Okay. Yeah.
Um, and
And is that on presumably on the More 4 platform, is it?
it's on Channel 4. It's on channel4.com programs. Channel4.com/programs/time team /episode guide. You'll find all of them.
Wonderful.
We'll post the link
Mm.
for the viewer. I would uh, also just say that I'm just checking the series number. I think it was, there we go.
Are you about to shamelessly plug yourself?
About to shamelessly unplug myself. No, I was just checking. Series 15, episode 8, which is called Blitzkrieg on Shooters Hill.
Uh-huh.
Now, I have no pecuniary interest in this whatsoever, as they don't pay repeat fees.
No, no.
But it is about the conflict archaeology of World War II on Shooters Hill here and certain people not very far away from where I'm sitting were involved in putting that program together.
Brilliant.
It and actually, what I will say for people who most people, everyone's going to be familiar with Time Team. It was hugely influential, I think, in British archaeology uh, for good, as again Mike Hayward said
Hmm.
in our interview. It put money into local projects which otherwise wouldn't have had money going into them.
Hmm.
Certainly brought resources to them like geophysics that otherwise they wouldn't have had. Certainly our case in Shooters Hill, we did 18 months, 2 years of work and fundraising in the Time Team 3 days
Right.
because of what they were able to bring to the table.
Yeah.
So whatever criticisms people have of the program, and some of them are legitimate, some of them aren't,
Hmm.
it was overall a massive good for archaeology. It showed what archaeologists look like, what we do, how appalling our dress sense is, mostly. But also it showed how much fun it is, how much teamwork work is involved, and it is a crying shame that the British archaeological sector didn't pick up the baton and run with it that Time Team offered.
Mm.
There is no equivalent now, and I think we're the poorer for that. The one thing I would say about Time Team Episode 3, Series 15, Episode 8, the third segment is bollocks. It was a narrative that was put in by the producer, which is one of the problems of working in television. And at the time, I wasn't experienced enough to spot what was going on and to say, wait a minute, you can't say that because it's
Right.
not true.
Okay.
But it was put on in post production. But having said that, I don't regret taking part. They were great people to work with,
Hmm.
and so look, just explore that playlist because there are riches there to enjoy,
Okay.
including the program where they spent 50 minutes not finding anything at all significant archaeologically, and the
Yes.
other one where they spent the first 2/3 of the program looking in the wrong part of a field because they misread a map.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
I think I
yeah,
remember both of those actually. Yep. Uh-huh.
and that was the point. It showed that archaeologists are human and that mistakes get made,
Hmm.
and they kept them in.
Yeah.
They did. There was none of the manufactured narrative that you get in modern American
No.
pseudo historical documentaries like Hunting Hitler and Ancient Aliens and so on.
Yeah.
It genuinely was shot on the fly over 3 days, and they did respond to things happening.
Hmm.
And yeah, if people made mistakes, they were largely kept in.
Yeah.
But before we finish, and this should have been actually my full media pick, um, and I think perhaps it's an appropriate one to finish on this week, and that is to mark the passing at the age of 92 of Albert Uderzo, the co-creator of Asterix,
Ah, yes, of
uh,
course. Yes.
um, who, who died at the end of March. Um, I think many of us who work in archaeology will have grown up with Asterix
Mm.
and Dogmatics and Obelix and
Get
the
a fix.
vital statistics and Getafix and all those wonderful names, all those incredible puns. The fact that they were brilliant stories in the first place. They were beautifully written. They were beautifully drawn, and then they were they found brilliant translators and to you know make them work in so many other different languages, including Latin.
Mm. Mm.
It's just a wonderful creation, and like all the best historical writing, it tells us as much about us as it does about the past.
Yeah.
And very
Yeah.
deliberately, it was very deliberately and gently satirical.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to the extent, if you remember, Asterix introduces tea and the tea break to England, I think it is, or is it just? Yeah,
Well, but yeah, and
it was.
in that sense as well, as a child, I got used to get very angry at the fact that Asterix was somehow meeting Cleopatra and the Vikings. But you know what? It's fine. It's fine. It's
Yeah.
Asterix and Obelix. There's no problem. Just one thing I suppose I would say, just briefly on the Shooters Hill thing. Um,
Mm,
when I last year, I think it was, wasn't it? I was down in the southeast and took the opportunity to come and visit you. Um,
yeah.
and yeah, just like a flying visit. And
Mm.
what was interesting is that I found myself driving on Shooters Hill. Suddenly, and I saw the sign Shooters Hill, and I saw what I thought was the place where the pillbox was. And I think that's am I here? And it was a delight to see how. Uh, to really, but I suppose a way of saying this is to say it highlighted to me the fact that this archaeology is all around us all the time, and of course I know that. Of course I see it all the time. I
Mm.
photograph it all the time for example, for my Instagram account. Um,
Yeah,
but more. But in this instance, it was a real reminder that actually a solid case study, and in that instance, a whole hour of television can come out of
yeah,
this relatively prosaic little road on the
yeah,
outskirts of Greater London. It was really interesting just to be there and then pass through that space, because I think often when you watch Time Team you have this because of the lens that they cast onto to certain sites and places, you have this hyper real um, moment. It almost feels like there's
yeah,
a it feels like every episode is a sort of a Stonehenge level kind of moment. This is an area that we
yeah,
are digging, and this is a place that everyone know. And but actually, I think that's probably one of the I suppose what I'm saying is that's one of the underrated successes of Time Team, is the fact
mm,
that it brought you as an audience member, and for example me as a child,
mm,
along with the experts and the specialists to share with you as a layperson the enthusiasm and the excitement that they felt for what essentially was a field, or what in that
yeah,
instance was a street. You know, that's
yeah.
the beauty of it. It let you into that world, I think.
Absolutely, it was the exact opposite to the showcase National Museum, which has its place, the showcase national site like Stonehenge, although that obviously has
Mm,
its place as
mm,
well because it is a uniquely wonderful monument, and so many others on that level all over the world. No, what it showed, and for me, and I'm suspecting for you too, from what you're saying, what it showed was that anywhere we live has these wonderful stories
mm,
that can be told about. All you have to have is the eye and the knowledge to be able to interpret and tell those stories.
mm,
And that was what was so wonderful about it. And in fact, may probably, the stories that were set in places like Shooters Hill or a village somewhere in Somerset or in Yorkshire or whatever, often more memorable than the specials that they did at places like Buckingham Palace. Although
mm.
that was hilarious because you had two wonderful, two avowed Republicans like Tony Robinson and Mick Aston digging up the Queen's garden. It was wonderful.
Well, as you say, we can all watch those now, um, and stay entertained for however long we are sequestered at home. Um, Thank you for your time as ever today, Andy. As you say, we did have a bit of a break for lunch today, and this is partly again because of the strange times that we're working in. Mrs. Soup is working from home, and it was lunchtime, so and I suppose that maybe that
We
says
both work.
something. Maybe that says something about our working practices, and so much as normally we would just work straight through a reasonable lunchtime, wouldn't we? So
Yeah.
perhaps this is reminding us that we need to have those
Mm.
in place as well. Sorry, go on.
And I'd just like to leave our view with maybe one hopeful note that
Uh-huh.
a friend posted on my social media feed earlier on this week. And it was a comment from a book about the Black Death.
Hmm.
And it was a suggestion that when the plague had passed, people celebrated with an excess of drinking and fornication.
Okay, well, okay.
And on that note,
That's something to look forward to. Thank you again. And also, as I say, thank you for everyone at home for watching. Please do comment below as ever. And actually, especially in the next few months, if there's a particular story, please do let us know. Let us, just tell us if you want us to comment on a particular thing that comes to your attention, because it may get a bit harder to find archaeological news. And until next time, do take
stay safe
care.
and stay,
Yeah, yeah. Stay safe.
yeah, stay safe, stay safe, stay healthy.
Definitely. Bye bye.